The next speaker is the CEO of Jeju Offshore Aquaculture Corporation. Mr. Cho Eun-ik studied economics in Seogang University of Korea. He was an active venture capitalist before founding Jeju Offshore Aquaculture Corporation in 2016 to do business of offshore aquaculture cage of bluefin tuna. He's going to tell us about bluefin offshore aquaculture. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Cho Eun-ik. It is my great pleasure to listen from many researchers and experts. And while listening to them, I found some similarities between my research and their research, which is very encouraging. And I also had some self-reflection time. I'm living in Jeju Island, and I have been interested in foul water issue releasing from farms in Jeju. So I had this belief that aquaculture is one of the most eco-friendly production methods. Today, my topic is not too academic. I'm going to share with you what my company has been doing for the past 5 years. With that, I'd like to share with you the eco-friendly aquaculture trend and my own forecasts and perspective. According to the global history of bluefin tuna, you will see that Korean history of bluefin tuna aquaculture is not that long. Though we have a relatively short history of bluefin tuna aquaculture, we still have some insight that can be shared across the world. These are our cages, which were created back in 2016. It is 35 meters tall. It is equivalent to 7 to 8-story building. In December 2016, we brought the wildlife bluefin tuna, which is about 6 kilograms each, to these cages. They were the first bluefin tuna we brought in. Now they can weigh 60. Each of them weighs 60 kilograms. We fattened them. In July 2017, we transported some of the facilities from a Korean organization. So this juvenile bluefin tuna was stocked here from the NIFS. In the same year, again in July, another wildlife blue tuna was stocked. In the second cage, the bluefin tuna, now weighs 40 kilograms. From early 2018, we started our commercial sales. So we are providing bluefin tuna to hotel restaurants and famous bluefin tuna restaurants across the country. Of course, this industry has been hit hard by COVID-19. The sales were quite good up until this March, before it went down significantly. But I believe the Korean government is doing very well in responding to COVID-19, so we can get through this challenge soon. For the short history of 5 years, we had some achievements in the commercial sector due to the following reasons. One of the reasons is facility. Our facility doesn't require the cutting-edge technology. We have used technologies that were already available. NOAA and Oceans PASA, they jointly developed this model called the 6800. And this model, 20 of them have been installed in Korea, and my company has two of them. And 1 kilometer away from my company, there are another two. When it comes to facilities, I can say our location gives us some benefit. We are away from a crowded area, and as you may know, Jeju Island's sea is quite clean, and we are within the range of a typhoon. According to statistics of NIFS, the bluefin tuna we are raising have withstood the climate or the weather challenges. In that sense, the facility that we are owning now are quite simple, but they are very helpful. So we try to manage the stock even before some extreme weather events happen. We are not focused on post-management. Location matters as much as the facility. We are located quite in the middle of Jeju Island, so juvenile bluefin tuna, whether they are wildlife or they were grown in aquacultural farm, they are brought to a sea cage or offshore aquaculture cage, and my company is providing the service. In terms of species, I chose bluefin tuna for 2 reasons. Because my company may require an initial investment, which is quite a lot. And another reason is we wanted to avoid conflict with species that were grown in land-based farms. So those were 2 reasons why I chose bluefin tuna. I'm not saying this just because the president of NIFS is here, but my company is only 1 kilometer away from the headquarters of NIFS, and NIFS has more experience in this area than us, so we can learn from their lessons. So we have cooperated with NIFS to have support from the organization, and I think we've been doing quite well. So let me go back to today's topic, eco-friendly aquaculture. I'd like to point out 2 things. First, in Korea or other countries, the onshore cage, they stay in the same place for the 40 to 50 years. And it can cause some pollutions, and it can lead to red tide issue, and it causes, again, another pollution issue. So it circulates for about 30 years. The death rate can go up to 50%, and while destroying the environment of the surrounding area. They are the flaws and drawbacks of onshore cage. That is why we are turning our eye to the offshore cage aquaculture. As the previous speaker said before me, so RAS is quite necessary. So there is on land increasing demand, so that we can require only minimum amount of seawater. There is a good example in Japan, and the Mediterranean Sea, the death rate has gone up a little, though, but salmon in Norway is another good example. So I told you that we have been focusing on offshore cage, but we'd like to scale up the offshore cages. We have only 2 offshore aquaculture cages because we are trying to achieve economies of scale. So we have to increase the size of our facility, and at the same time, as you can see on the left-hand side pictures, the upper one is our facility, and the lower one was created by a Norwegian company. It is 3 times larger than ours. Our capacity is 6,800, and their capacity is more than 21,000. So we need to scale up the size, and as you can see in the picture at the bottom, size matters, but what is also important is to make a complex for efficient management and operation of the offshore cages. We may try a complex, fish farming complex, because our goal is to reduce fossil fuel and switch over to electric cars and offshore wind power as an energy source. In terms of those environmental protection causes, we may have to combine and integrate fish farming with tourism and other industries. That could be a good solution. As a businessman like me, those are typical solutions, but that requires capital and cutting-edge technologies. Regarding capital and technologies, I believe Korea has already the capital and the technologies ready. As you know, Korea is one of the leading countries in the shipbuilding and shipping industries. The slide shows domestic offshore aquaculture in Korea. In Korea, it's not enough, but we managed to pass the break-even point, not only in Korea, but in Dongyeong Island. So we have 2 offices, one in Jeju and the other in Dongyeong Island. So after we get through the coronavirus pandemic, I believe we can increase our revenues. But for that to happen, we may have to focus on other areas as well, not just on wildlife, bluefin tuna. So we need to continue to provide stocking of juvenile bluefin tuna so that we can on one hand we can fatten the juvenile tuna to 70 to 80 kilograms, and on the other hand we can provide other fishing farms with juvenile bluefin so that we can play as a bridge or brokerage between 2 different places. As somebody mentioned earlier, bluefin tuna, especially juvenile bluefin tuna, requires continuous research. And at the bottom of the page, I mentioned there is a lack of awareness among consumers. I'm not trying to blame someone. I think we should look inside first. In the industry, people should reflect on themselves first. They should think about if they have done a good job in educating consumers. And online business has been flourishing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'd like to suggest we take it seriously, the not only we take good care of the species, but take the quality of the product seriously. Next slide shows some agendas. So I'd like to focus on bluefin tuna, wildlife, juvenile bluefin tuna. We need a reliable supply chain for these species. Only then we can achieve economies of scale for juvenile bluefin tuna. This means we need government support. So we are always looking for government support. So one of the solutions we came up with is a quota system. When I travel other countries, I realized that quota can play an important role. So when quota is applied, we have to think economically. So in the past, you gave this much, so you will give the same amount for the years to come. But that should be changed depending on the added value that a species can create. Some species can be caught in a net by accident. So it can be sold at 5,000 won or 10,000 won. And bluefin tuna has this tendency that its flesh can be very breakable. So if it is stored under over a certain temperature, it is not eatable. But I can say the bluefin tuna, when it is juvenile tuna, it takes quite time to be mature enough. And if it is mature enough, it can be sold at 50,000 won or 100,000 won. So the price can jump by 10 times, but it requires other costs. But at the same time, it can create added value. Another example is there was a sad and tragic news. Chairman of Samsung Electronics recently died. He was a very good businessman. He grew the semiconductor industry of Korea. Semiconductor industry can be compared to find a grain in the sand. And DRAM, you may have heard of DRAM. And semiconductor can be more expensive than DRAM. If you go to a desert country, you will see that some manure of a horse is used for fuel. So it depends on how creative you are if you want to create values, especially added values. Another challenge or another agenda item is scale up. If we want to achieve economies of scale in a short time, there should be insurance system in place. For bluefin tuna, it can be said as a dangerous species. So it is difficult to buy an insurance policy that covers bluefin tunas. So those who have done this business before me were always told that there could be no insurance system that will cover bluefin tuna. That means for capital and financial fund from big companies to be invested in this area, in this sector, we should do more. Because people find it very risky to make an investment in dangerous species. Or some people may argue that there's no point in granting subsidies in bluefin tuna specifically. That makes me think that the example of Tesla, the EV manufacturer. Tesla was founded in 2003, And for 10 years, it had losses. It lost money. But it survived in the market because it was supported by the government, specifically the federal government and the state government, through carbon trade. Tesla was able to receive subsidies. Penalties are given to companies that emit a large amount of greenhouse gases. So the same logic can be applied here. Company A sells tuna at $50. Company B sells it at $100. But the two companies' carbon emission footprint can be different. So the bigger the company out of the two with a bigger carbon footprint should be penalized and should receive less subsidy. Hyundai Motors is also receiving subsidies. Hyundai Motors is the world's 7th largest company, and it is Korean chaebol. For every car it sells, $1,000 of subsidies given to the company. With these examples available, it is almost impossible for us to argue and insist that bluefin tuna requires or deserves to receive subsidies. So there is this gap in awareness or perception between us and the ministries of oceans and fisheries and the ministries of industries and commerce. Lastly, this is not our official data. This is a quote from another university. So, economic feasibility should not be the only factor when you try to achieve reliable supply of aquaculture seafood. When bluefin tuna, when it is grown in wild sea, as you can see, the mercury content is disproportionate to its weight. But in aquaculture case, tunas have limited mobility, so it has a result, which is the population increases rapidly. So you can see that in the graph, but it also contains larger amount of mercury. So we always try to inform and educate consumers of checking mercury content in bluefin tuna. Thank you for listening. I started this presentation by saying self-reflection, and I wanted to share this self-reflection with you. So I'm going to play a short video which will show the business activities of my company. Thank you very much.